Hello everyone, welcome to special session on UPSC Prelims 2021 with Dr. Vivek Rana. Hope the paper has gone as per your expectation. We all know UPSC Prelims 2020 was one of the toughest prelims exam in last decade. It is reflected in exceptionally low cutoffs. It was just 92.5 marks. This year we can say the paper is slightly better from 2020 but nevertheless a difficult nut to crack. So in this session we will decode what has been the sectional distribution of questions. So there's not much change in the sectional distribution in the major or we can say the conventional sections, but yes, the couple of sections have surprise elements which can be make or break for a lot of students this time. So in UPSC we have seen a trend that in last 5 or 6 years almost 55 to 60% of the questions are multiple statement based. So it follows the trend this year as well. There are 58 questions which are based on multiple statements, and then the remaining questions are the conventional, you could say one-liner one, but nevertheless they are tricky too. So the section which has dominated UPSC Prelims 2021 is the, you could say, polity and governance. Last year we had seen there were 18 questions, so this year also there are 18 questions, but these are the most from any section. So this section you can say almost 8 to 9 questions were of easy nature, and another you could say 4 or 5 questions were of moderate difficulty, and then we have 4 or 5 unattemptable questions. So more or less if you have done well in easy to moderate sections, you should say you have done justice to this section, and more or less this is the section which will fetch you marks just like in the earlier you could say the previous year's civil service examination. Then the second most asked section is economy, and this is once again a section from last 3 years. It was the most asked section. It was crossing 20 questions limit, but this year we have seen a slight decrease in share of its question. There are 16 questions, and more or less they are testing your, you could say, conventional, theoretical as well as the applied part of economy. It's good to see they have neglected the factual part of the schemes, programs, the trends, rankings or the international organization, but nevertheless this section 2 has its own set of, you could say, some questions which might not be of your comfort. So more or less if you have been attempting this paper for now last 2 or 3 years, you might be mentally prepared to handle this type of questions, and more or less this is once again an important section which you should have ideally done well if you want to get through the second stage. Then the Indian history, we have seen last year there were 16 questions. When I am saying Indian history, I am not differentiating it into ancient, medieval or modern, I am including all 3 parts. So this year also there are 16 questions, so we can say the second spot is tied between history and economy. And more or less the modern history few questions are definitely attemptable, but some are once again out of box, and ancient medieval part is a tough part. So all those who have history as an optional or who have prepared an extra in this section of ancient medieval, they might have got a dividend in this year's examination. So we can say it's history is also a mixed bag for most of students this year. And if we include the culture part as well, there are 5 questions in the culture section. So if we add to the history, then we can say the history part is the dominating part as well, because then the questions adds up to 21, which is almost 1/5 of paper. In culture you don't have to bother too much. If you have been able to manage 2 or 3 questions, that's a good enough score, because if we look at how much energy you invest in preparing for this section, so 2 or 3 questions from this section is a good enough attempt. So you don't should have to bother. Even if you have left these unmarked or just attempted 1 or 2, you should be content, because these are the questions which generally push your score to the negative side if you are taking unnecessary risk in this section. Now the next section we have is environment and ecology, and we know that IFS exam is clubbed, so this is one of the most consistent sections in the UPSC examination. There are 14 questions. Nevertheless, in earlier we have seen that there used to be a time when almost 20 questions used to be asked, and this time once again we have seen a slight change. They have reverted back to the ecology theme. You will find questions on, you could say, the conventional themes like the phytoplanktons, or you could say the biological interactions of symbiosis, mutualism. But nevertheless, the examples are a bit tricky. So most of you students might have to take risk in some of the questions, and might not have find few questions to their comfort. The pollution part is once again another dominant part in the ecology section. Now the next section is geography, with there 13 questions, a slight decrease from last year. Last year we had seen there were 15 questions in the geography. Probably the two questions which have been ignored are from the map section, because UPSC is known to frame some innovative or out of box questions from the map work, but this time that interesting part is a bit missing. But nevertheless, if you have been preparing the conventional geography and there are questions on rivers, so that compensates for more or less of it. So basically the current part is little less in the Indian geography part, conventional part is once again the hallmark. Yeah. Now coming to the other sections, they are a bit tricky, and these are the sections which might have been irritant for a lot of students. So this year, general science part, which used to be totally neglected in last 5 or 6 years, we have seen last year there was just one question on cell wall. You could say plant and animal cell different. This year there are 8 questions, and what matters more is that there are questions from physics and chemistry. Lot of chemicals, controversial chemicals which were in news, they have been asked, and the basic concepts about light, or you could say the polarity of water, have been asked too. So the students who have been appearing in state services or in other competitive exams where general science is asked, they might have find those questions to their comfort. If you have been preparing solely for UPSC, this section might have been a tricky one for you, because you do not, if you might have taken this section for granted, because you might not get the return by reading those NCRTs in previous year, but this year definitely those 8 questions could be make or break. Then the other section is the science and tech, and this time it's surprising that we have seen how UPSC over the last 4 or 5 years was asking almost double digit question, 10 to 13 questions were being asked, but this year we have seen they have totally neglected the defense, space, IT, computers, nuclear, robotics, artificial intelligence, emerging technologies theme completely. They have just focused on biotechnology. Maybe it's a pandemic year, they wanted to just ask the biotech theme in depth. So there are 5 questions from science and tech, and all are from biotech, which require a deeper understanding of topics like RDT, genetic engineering, the concept of vectors. So more or less these are not throwaway questions. Only the students with bio background would have managed them with comfort. And then the most tricky part this year is the current affair. A lot of students have been following a lot of websites, they have been preparing extensively their own notes to newspapers and current affairs. But this year there are just 5 questions. Last year also, if we look at the trend, there were just 3 questions. So for a change, we can say UPSC is now focusing on core conventional areas and not too bothered about the mugging up of facts. And even in this current affairs section, out of 5, 3 are from sports section, and we have seen in last decade not a single question has been asked from sports. Maybe it's an Olympic year, so there is one question on Olympic, but cricket and other sports are also there. So these might have been tricky, because generally most of the websites do not follow these sports current affairs which are catering to UPSC. So these 5 questions once again would have been tough one to attempt. If you have been following this, or you have interest in sports, then you could have managed them well. And so we can say more or less the paper is once again on difficult side if you look at the overall picture. Yes, in all sections there are just handful of questions which are attemptable. Other you have to apply and make an educated choice by eliminating the option, which has been the trend in UPSC lately. It's too early to speculate about cutoff, but more or less we can say in 2018 and 19 the cutoff was 98, and they might this year also it should be somewhere around it. Definitely a little more than the last year considering the difficulty, and still students are more mentally prepared for this set of paper. So if you have any specific queries, you can feel free to ask, and wishing you best of luck for the next phase of your preparation. Irrespective of what happens in next couple of days once you compare your answer key, make sure the next 2 or 3 months are invested in your mains preparation, because a lot of time we feel disheartened if the answer key is are not up to our expectation, or the score is not somewhere around, at times you can get a surprise call to the next stage as well, and if you are not prepared, you will regret it. So it's my advice to you would be just stay positive, calm. If you are having any issues, you can connect with me. I will definitely like to address if it's in my comfort. And wishing you once again all the best for all your future endeavors. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.